The long-awaited sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse came out a little bit ago, and I fucking loved it. I don't really think that's a hot take here, considering that pretty much everything I've seen has been positive about the movie, and some people have even been saying that it is the best Spider-Man movie. Now, if you ask me, it is really hard to be Into the Spider-Verse, but I think that this movie kinda had a chance at doing that. And there are several things that I do think that this movie does better than Into the Spider-Verse. First off, obviously the animation is so much better in this movie. All the art styles put together and the way that each world looks different looks incredible, if you ask me. Spider-Punk's world looks amazing, Spider-Man India's, also I love Miles' world, even if it's kind of just the same as Into the Spider-Verse, but I still think it looks really good. There are some other worlds as well which you get to see that are really cool, like Spider Society's world and the really cool Lego world as well. Honestly though, I think my favorite might be Gwen's world, especially in the ending, where the visuals are just so good as they reflect the characters' emotions. Also, the opening action scene in Gwen's world is so fucking good, and I think it might actually be my favorite action scene in any Spider-Man movie. Because the amazing and fluid animation, the really fun choreography, and also because there's some genuine, really fun banter between Gwen and Vulture here. I also love everything we see her before that, the unique version of the intro, but with her great art style. And I really love the scene where she's just banging on drums as we get to see a ton of flashbacks and recaps and really great foreshadowing too. And also, in that action scene that I previously mentioned, I love the moment where she just closes her eyes and thinks about the music that she plays every day. It is a really fun moment, if you ask me. Everything with her world is just so fucking fun and good and unique. I genuinely love it. And I love how her art style of her world is basically one-to-one with the amazing comic covers for the Spider-Gwen comic books. I think Gwen was one of my favorite characters in the movie because I just really enjoyed her struggles, and I thought that she was one of the most engaging characters. Everything with her dad was really good, and again, the emotional climax was so good. And like I said, the animation in that scene was great too, with all the colors reflecting how they were feeling. In fact, that animation was so good that it was actually kind of distracting because I was paying more attention to the actual animation instead of what the characters were saying. Now, that's not a criticism, and that isn't to say that what the characters were saying wasn't interesting, it was just that the animation was that top tier. And again, I thought the opening had some really fun animation, not even just the action scene, just where we see Gwen's origin story was really great. It was super heartbreaking, and also I'm really glad that they changed the Peter Parker model. Peter looks much younger here than he did in that flashback in Into the Spider-Verse, but I'm glad about that because it means that Gwen was no longer best friends with the 40-year-old man. There are a lot of other fun characters though. I really enjoyed Spider-Man India, even though he wasn't in the movie for very long. It was fun to see a Spider-Man that hadn't gone through the tragedies that other ones have gone through, and I thought that he was actually pretty funny too, so it was enjoyable. Hobie Brown was also really interesting in this movie. Again, I love his animation. It is genuinely the best looking part of the movie. When I was watching it, I was genuinely curious how they were able to animate him like this and how it was able to fit in with the rest, and that is not a question that I've asked since I watched the first Spider-Verse movie. I think easily the best character though in the movie is Miles. I think this movie proved to a lot of people how truly badass Miles can be and how interesting he is. Because I love him in the first Spider-Verse movie, I truly think that he is great, but this movie actually proved why he is truly an amazing character and what makes him Spider-Man. So much so that Miles Morales is now my favorite Spider-Man in terms of the movies, and he's probably my favorite adaptation of the character in general. I love how the movie takes its time with establishing Miles' struggles with balancing his life as Spider-Man and being a regular kid. And his struggles with his parents I thought were very interesting as well, with Rio and Jefferson. It's honestly crazy how good these two characters were in this movie. Jefferson was already a three-dimensional character in Into the Spider-Verse, but I think that this movie elevated him so much higher. And I was actually starting to get pretty emotional with the character when he was giving his speech. However, Rio had a massive improvement. I thought that she was okay in Into the Spider-Verse, but it's actually crazy how great she was here. She even gets one of my favorite scenes and most impactful scenes in the entire movie when talking to Miles. And I gotta say, I really love the scene at the end when they're talking to Gwen. It's really funny if you ask me, and I never really realized how hard Jefferson was going on Gwen until I rewatched it.
Well, that's his jacket, Emo. Where's Miles?
I think it's impossible to talk about the characters in this movie without talking about the antagonists. Starting with Miguel, I think that he is extremely interesting simply with what he believes in compared to Miles. I thought all the stuff with the canon events and how it linked back to Miguel was super interesting. And it was also super interesting with how it linked to the Spider Society and why that was created. I should quickly mention that I think that the Spider Society was really fun with how it brought in some cool cameos. Like Aaron Davis' Prowler, which was really cool simply because of what we saw with Homecoming. and Spectacular Spider-Man, which I thought was really cool, as we got to see what also happened to Captain Stacy. And honestly, the scene where we see that Captain Stacy died made me really sad because that's probably my favorite adaptation of the character, and honestly one of the only good adaptations besides Captain Stacy in this movie. Because most adaptations either like royally fuck up Captain Stacy or they just don't really do anything interesting with him or don't make him that special. It makes the line about him telling Miles that the canon events are true hit even harder. But again, that canon events thing makes the ideologies between Miguel and Miles so much more interesting. Because Miles believes that he can do both and have what he wants because that's what Spider-Man would do. But Miguel's experiences have made him believe otherwise. And I think it's interesting because you can see both sides and how there isn't necessarily a right or wrong in this situation. They both have points. It also leads to some really interesting things with other characters, such as Gwen. I think it was interesting how she clearly cared a lot for Miles, but at the same time she couldn't leave the Spider Society because she didn't want to go home. The conflict in general with all this stuff was very interesting if you ask me. Despite all that, I still don't think that Miguel's the best antagonist. In my opinion, that easily goes to Spot. I love Spot in this movie, and I love how it starts off as a joke that Miles does not take seriously at all, but then becomes a legitimate, scary threat. And how he ties into Miles' backstory and how they basically created each other was very interesting if you ask me, and a genuine twist I didn't see coming. This realization brings out what has gotta be the best line in any Spider-Man movie.
I created you. You created me.
Spider-Man, why did you create that guy? I did.
Also, I'd just like to add that I was hoping for Spot in Spider-Verse like 2 years ago, and I'm so glad that he was here. I win. Another thing that I think the film greatly improves upon in terms of the first one is the soundtrack. The original score for this movie is so heat, and also I really like all the songs made by Metro too. Pretty much all the songs have made their way to my playlist except for a few, and that's because A, I just really like the songs, and also because I thought the way that they were used in the movie was very effective. Like during Gwen's backstory scene, or just when Miles is finished having an argument with his parents. Now, I know that a lot of people actually don't like the use of that music in these movies, but honestly, I've never really had a complaint about it, but then again, it's the music that I listen to anyway, so maybe that's it. I also think that the movie has some really great pacing, especially considering the fact that I was never bored or thought it was dragging on. The film really takes its time with establishing all of Miles' struggles, but I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really good at helping flesh out all the relationships between the characters and their struggles, and also made Miles a much more nuanced character. And plus, this movie kind of knows that it's a two-parter, so it's able to take advantage of all the time that it knows it has. Which I'm happy about, and honestly, that only makes me even more excited for Beyond the Spider-Verse, even if that movie is undoubtedly gonna get delayed. I'm gonna mention this now, but a lot of people have issues with the ending, but I honestly didn't really mind it. I think where the endings left off made sense for a part 1 of 2 movie. This movie is like 2 endings, one with Miles and one with Gwen. I think if Miles' shot was the actual ending, then I could see the complaint, considering that his ending feels more like the ending of a TV episode in preparation for the finale. But since it ended on Gwen's, I don't actually mind, because her ending was much more fitting for a part 1 of 2 movie. It ending on Gwen is similar to like how Two Towers ends, or how Dead Man's Chest ends. So I don't mind this cliffhanger, and it makes sense. This movie also just serves as a really great sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, as you can see how much foreshadowing was in that movie, which is paid off here. Like with 42 in this shot, which makes so much more sense after seeing Across the Spider-Verse. Now, unfortunately, I do have a couple criticisms of the movie, however, none of them really hindered my enjoyment, honestly. I guess first off, I find it really weird how the film kind of forgets about Spot in the second half. Like, he's mentioned, but at the same time, he just isn't there. Not until the end anyway, and I find that kind of weird because the movie establishes that he can travel to universes basically instantly. So when he leaves Spider-Man India's world, I'd assume that he would instantly travel to Miles' world. And again, that should be practically instant. However, the movie doesn't really treat it that way. And in fact, he doesn't even show up until the end. So I'm very curious what he was doing between when we first and last saw him. Because again, I'd assume that it should be instant, but apparently not? What the fuck were you doing? Another thing that isn't very major, but I'm not sure if I love Peter B. Parker in this movie. I'm fine with the choice that he makes to kind of side with Miguel, especially considering the fact that he switches sides in the ending. But he just wasn't nearly as good as he was in Into the Spider-Verse, and that's mostly because I found this to be a little annoying at points. His entire joke is just that he's kind of an unsafe parent bringing his baby into these very unsafe situations. And I thought it was funny sometimes, but at other points I didn't think it was that funny. It was just kind of weird. I don't hate him in this movie, and I don't think that he was character assassinated like many people say he was, but I still don't love the way that he was in this movie. I also thought that Jessica Drew was just kind of a whatever character. Again, I didn't hate her, but she was just kind of nothing special. It's funny how much controversy her being pregnant but still fighting crime caused on the internet, only for her to be the least interesting part of the entire movie. I thought Lego Spider-Man was a more interesting character than her. Honestly, that's all I had for criticisms, and honestly, none of them hindered my enjoyment at all. Anyway, if I were to give this movie a score, it's kind of tricky because, again, I do have some criticisms, but none of them really hindered my enjoyment. And also because we haven't seen the second half of the story, so depending on how that goes, that could definitely change the score. I was originally going to give it a 9.5 out of 10, however, I don't know, that just doesn't feel right to me. Because I love this movie so fucking much. So I feel like I kind of have to give this movie a glorious 10 out of 10. It does have the chance to go down after Beyond the Spider-Verse, but I don't know, I can't really see that happening, especially if they take their time with the movie. So yeah, I fucking love this movie, and I'll forever be grateful for it. Not only because it's a great movie, but it's also opened me up to tons of other great content. Because this movie actually got me to read a ton of great Miles comics. I didn't read a lot of them before because a lot of people said they were bad, but I decided to give them my own read and I found them to be very good. And I always appreciate when a movie actually gets me to start reading more comics because even though I've been reading some for a while, again, Miles was never a character that I was reading, but I'm glad I am now. And you know it's a great adaptation when it actually gets you to want to start reading the comic books that it's based on. This movie is definitely my favorite Spider-Man movie, but honestly, I'm not sure if it's my favorite comic book movie. Not even my favorite comic book movie of the year. Because I saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I love that movie so much, and it hit me so hard, so I'm not entirely sure. I'm actually gonna have to think about that one. Anyway, that's really it for the video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure you let me know your thoughts on the movie down below in the comments. A like on this video would be heavily appreciated, and it'd also be cool if you subscribe to the channel. I really missed out on a lot of movies when I took a big break, so I'm trying to get out a bunch of reviews right now. Anyway, yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a great day, and peace.